regulated or is interfered with. And then it creates this imbalance, right, between your good bacteria that are necessary for digestion and for your well-being, and also the kind of negative bacteria, which are kind of there. And as long as that population is controlled, you are a healthy human. Thokoza Babalwa, thank you for joining us. Yes. So today we want to talk about a very serious condition, and a lot of people don't take it seriously because yisilungulela. Everybody calls it heartburn, but actually it's acid reflux disease. It's a disease. When you have acid reflux, it is your body trying to tell you something. Now, the question you ask is, what causes acid reflux? For bakwantu, and I'm going to speak about us because sinenkinga kakhulu thina ne-acid reflux. Acid reflux is caused by overproduction of acid in the stomach, right? So there's an overproduction of... Now, remember, guys, we're talking about acid, hydrochloric acid, HCl, not acetic acid or some of these minor small linear acid. We're talking about the kind of acid that's in your stomach that you can take, if you could take it, and you put it on a piece of cloth, would burn a hole in it. So that's why I say this is a very serious condition, and a lot of people aren't taking it seriously enough. Number one, what is causing acid reflux? Bagwantu. Bagwantu is starchy food. Your potatoes, your pap. And you guys, you're going to say this gogo is an anti-papist, because kahle kahle I am, because I know what terrible diseases come from eating ipap. The first of all, one of which is acid reflux. So why is that? Maybe the best way to explain this is to talk about a little bit about digestion of carbohydrates, right? Digestion of starch. What is actually happening, right? So first and foremost, your digestion of starch, I just got distracted by my daughter. Your digestion of starch starts in the mouth, right? As you are chewing, there is an enzyme in your saliva called salivary amylase. So that enzyme starts breaking down the starch into glucose. Here's the thing. If you've ever chewed a piece of white bread long enough, it's got that sweetish, you end up with like a sweetish taste. Yeah, because it's being partially broken down by that enzyme called salivary amylase, right? You with me? Now you're going to swallow it. It goes into your stomach. I have a graphic. Maybe that's the best way to do it, to show you, right? So you start digesting here. Today I fixed the camera, guys, so I'm sure you can see things as clearly instead of flipped over. So it starts here, right? You're producing saliva, salivary amylase, and then it goes down into where's your stomach? Your stomach is kind of behind your liver. Your stomach, right? Now, when it gets to the stomach, this is where the real deal happens. This is where it gets kind of fully digested, right? So in that digestion process, there is a secretion from the stomach lining of hydrochloric acid. There are actually like little pumps in your stomach lining that starts pumping hydrochloric acid in order to assist in the digestion of these carbohydrates. Now, there is a problem, and the problem is this. When your diet is very high in carbohydrate, i.e., if you look at your plate, you've got a mountain of papa, you've got 2 pieces of meat, and you've got 3 strings of spinach, imfino or morojo. What do you think is going to happen? Because remember, if you take this in and it's balanced, you've got maybe moderate starch, you've got high protein, and you've got lots and lots of vegetables. The digestion of these things counteract the overproduction of acid. But if you have a mountain of starch, tiny protein, and very little greens, greens, in this case, I'm talking about the necessity of greens as fiber. So you now don't have any kind of fiber to buffer that acid production. So you get an overproduction of hydrochloric acid. Now, then the digested starch goes out, goes through, and gets processed more in the liver and the pancreas get at work. We'll deal with those two organs at some point. But I wanted to stick with the stomach and talk about acid reflux. Now you have a stomach that's empty, but there's too much hydrochloric acid for it to be absorbed back or neutralized. Therefore, what happens? It moves, right? It moves. And the older you get, the worse heartburn gets because there is a valve at the top of the stomach. Let me show you here. They don't show the valve, but I can tell you about it. There is a valve right here at the top of the stomach, right? And this valve is a one-way thing. We know that a valve means things go one way. But as you get older, that valve kind of loosens. Now, it loosens because of age. It's normal. So now you've got acid reflux. Reflux means going backwards. So now it's coming out. Got bits of acid coming out of that sphincter that's supposed to be tightly closed. And it starts burning. That's why we call it heartburn, because it starts right by that opening. Why aren't you feeling it in your tummy? Well, because the stomach lining is designed to deal with that acid. So you don't feel it here. You start to feel heartburn because it's coming through that valve at the top of your stomach and now starts moving here. Guess what it's doing to your esophagus? This part, this part, this part. That burning you feel is because it's literally burning the cells of your esophagus. And of course, they have pain receptors, and therefore you feel the burn, you feel the pain. Now, hear me well. Chronic heartburn means you're literally burning away at your esophagus. What then happens? Inflammation of the esophagus. If it is in excess, like there are some people who wake up with heartburn, go to sleep with heartburn, they've tried ENO, they tried taking ash. You know, sometimes ash can neutralize acid, right? Because ash has a bicarbonate, and bicarbonate, if you add hydrochloric acid and say sodium bicarbonate from ash, right? Or you take ENO, which is basically sodium bicarbonate, it can neutralize some of it. But here's the problem. When it becomes chronic, do you know what happens? You're taking these over-the-counter things, it neutralizes. The hydrogen pumps say, we need to pump more. It's empty in there. We need to pump more. So even when your stomach is empty and there's nothing to digest, these pumps continue to pump hydrochloric acid. The danger with that is prolonged inflammation of your esophagus leads to cells in the esophagus starting to divide abnormally. And when that happens, it sets you up and puts you at high risk for esophageal and throat cancer. This is the source. The primary source of esophageal and throat cancer is acid reflux. So we go further down, right? Talk more about this. When your food has been digested here, there's also, oh my God, my fingers are moving in the wrong direction. Over here, right? There is another valve so that food moves into what is the small intestine, which is kind of this thing that's like this, right? There is another valve there. If there's excess acid in your stomach, that acid will eat at that valve, rendering it useless. So it can no longer, it opens up. So now there's a movement there. Now that valve is damaged, and now you have acid going into the small intestine, which is called the duodenum or duodenum. Small intestine, let's keep it simple. If you've ever heard of stomach ulcers or duodenal ulcers, those are the two main ulcers that bother abagwantu, is because of acid reflux. Because remember, acid eats holes, like acid. Listen, if you've ever seen somebody with an acid burn, you'll know what I mean. So if someone pours acid on you here, not only does it hurt like crazy, but it will leave, it'll leave a hole, and it'll keep going until you put something to neutralize that acid, right? So this is what it's doing to the very soft lining, because remember, we're talking about soft tissue organs here. We're not talking about just skin, which is kind of tough and has several layers. We're talking about soft tissue. You guys, if you've ever slaughtered a chicken or a goat, you know what I mean by soft tissue, right? So eventually you get duodenal ulcers, you get stomach ulcers, because yeah, the stomach is designed for acid, but not in the excess amounts that are caused by acid reflux. So you get stomach ulcers, you get duodenal ulcers. Now, you've got a permanent hole in your stomach, you've got a permanent hole in your throat. Yeah, because the cell growth starts with like just irritation of the throat. The cells grow funny. You can even puncture holes in your esophagus too, right? But the most common things that happen to the throat and to the lining, because your esophagus has totally different cells to your stomach and your duodenum. So this acid is going to affect these differently, but in a negative way, no matter which way you look at it. Bakwantu, this is really serious. That's why I tell you that you're going to hear me talk about carbohydrates almost every single live that I do, because I want to impress upon you how this stuff is toxic to us, right? So now let's talk about, so this is the condition, right? You are suffering from chronic heartburn. You are suffering from acid reflux. No matter what you do now, you wake up in the morning with it, you go to bed. Sometimes you even, like, it comes all the way up into your mouth, where you're like, and you feel like, it almost feels like you've thrown up, right? Like you've vomited. But you know it's not, because yashisa, and yababa, right? That's acid. You can't continue like that. And you can't continue taking over the counter things, but you're not modifying your diet. That's why anyone who comes to me with acid reflux, the first thing we look at is your diet. And I will tell them, this is not a joke. You eliminate starch. Yesterday, you eliminate starch. Basically, you're going to eliminate pap. You're going to eliminate bread. You're going to eliminate potatoes. Now, you can substitute pap with things like sorghum or millet. Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry. Shame. It happens anytime, anywhere. I'm sorry. That must have sounded really loud. Right? You can substitute millet and sorghum. Why do I say that? Because our digestive systems as Bagwantu can digest those things more efficiently. Number one, millet and sorghum are ground whole, right? It's a whole grain that we get that is powdered, and you can make your pap with it. Number two, it has so many health benefits. It's got your folic acid, it's got the whole range of B vitamins, it's got enough fiber to stabilize that acid production. But more importantly, it has less starch per gram than does maize meal or wheat. Wheat is another one we'll talk about separately. But it's another no-no, because those are imported things. Rice, for many of us, is an important thing, especially the varieties of rice that they have now. So you need to be conscious of what you're eating and how it is making your body feel. Because your food could be killing you. I don't mean to scare you. I'm just stating facts as I know them. Right? Not only that, when you eat grains like sorghum or millet, they have a certain amount of protein that needs digestion too. But the nice thing is the presence of that protein, the presence of fiber makes it such that acid production is not in excess. How many of you have substituted sorghum or millet for maize in your diet, and you find that you feel a whole lot better? I recommend that if you're suffering from acid reflux, I highly recommend you try it. And start with a small amount. Don't go eating a mountain of it, please. Nothing in excess is ever good for you. Everything has to be balanced, right? Because as it is, we're consuming more food than our bodies actually need. Our bodies, most of us need very little food, especially if you're like me, whose work is sitting here and talking to you guys. I'm sedentary most of the time. I'm not physically active. I'm not a worker out in the fields. If you understood how umbila was introduced into Africa, it was introduced as a food to do what? To give the laborers who were laboring on farms, who were laboring in factories, in construction, for who? For umlungu. Kahle kahle into yomlungu le. Who doesn't care whether it is killing you slowly or not, as long as umlungu gets what umlungu needs from you. Now, imagine in people, and like I said, remember, sorghum has less carbohydrate per gram than does maize meal. Maize meal is nothing but carbohydrate. And remember, I said there's fiber in sorghum because it is ground up as a whole wheat. Millet, the same, it's a whole wheat. With maize, they refine it. So literally there's zero fiber because they remove the husks from the kernels, then ground it up. So there is no nutritional value in umbila or maize meal. Well, umbila ungcono because at least it's got the husks. You can say, okay, I'm getting the starch, but I'm also getting some fiber. Plus there's a tiny kernel in there that will give you a tiny bit of fat. That's why you can make maize oil. You can extract oil from it. But it's so insignificant, especially given the risks for disease that umbila brings to us, Bagwantu. Right? So now you've got, so it has no nutritional value. No vitamins, no this, none of those things, no fiber, no protein. It's just pure sugar. Now, if you are a laborer and you are working at digging pits and what from dawn to dusk, that might work for you. Although it may cause other problems you're not currently aware of. But you can use that energy, you can use that sugar for work. But if you're sitting like this, you have no business eating maize. Because, it's a problem. And we'll talk about the other issues to do with health that are impacted by umbila. So some people are like, oh, wow, where do we get the millet? Where do we get the thing? Guys, you get millet in the store. At GEK, we provide millet. So if you go on the GEK page, there is an email at GEK@info. You can, and please put in the subject millet, because I'm gonna go in there and then I will dig those out myself and make sure that you get what you need. But my point is this, please be conscious of what you put in your mouth. No? Now, here's another thing that makes or exacerbates this acid reflux for Tina Bagwantu. I must say it like this. Tina Bagwantu, the lives we live on this planet currently, we are under chronic stress. All of us. Whether it be minimal stress, whether it be maximum stress, okusalayo, we are very stressed out people. Chronic stress, meaning we've been stressed out. Our ancestors have been stressed out. We carry stress in our DNA even. Why do I say this? I say this because when you are stressed, you exacerbate or make worse the acid reflux. And because we're all living under chronic stress, we really need to watch some of the things that we're eating. Because it makes our health conditions even worse. Less stress. Why? When you're like really chronically stressed, you're secreting two hormones. Number one is adrenaline. Adrenaline is a flight or fight response. Yeah. When you're stressed, the body interprets that as needing to get ready to fight or to run. Right? What does that do? Just so you understand. Your brain says we need to fight, we need to run. Therefore, it shuts down your organs so that blood flows to your skeletal muscles to get ready for fighting or to get ready muscles for running. Now, by shutting down, say, your digestive system, what happens? Digestion is slowed down considerably. That's why a lot of stressed out people suffer from things like constipation. When you slow down the gut, the acid, even if it was normal levels, is sitting in your stomach for way too long. Eventually, it's going to eat at that top valve here. It's going to eat at that top valve, right? And it's going to render that valve useless, and then acid will just start moving. And literally, the reason acid moves so quick, so easily, even when you're sitting upright, is because the acid and you can hear when it's being secreted in your stomach. You know that sound that goes, like there's liquid being pumped into your stomach, acid. So it's kind of bubbly because yashisa lentole, and it's coming up. Because what? You're stressed, your digestive system has slowed down, acid is being kept in there for way too long. It also is going to damage this one that I told you about, this one. The one that closes off your stomach from your small intestine. Then now it starts leaking downwards into your small intestine. That's why you find that most people who are going through a hard time, who are stressed, end up with stomach ulcers or duodenal ulcers. Because acid. Excuse me. So please take this seriously. Take it to heart. Start thinking about ways you can modify your diet. I know it's not easy. A lot of us are eating the things that are available to us. A lot of us don't really have much of an option. But I can tell you that if you wean yourself off of white starches, carbohydrate, even glucose, we'll talk about the effects of glucose in another. Because your starch, basically, at the end of its digestive process, is nothing but sugar. So your pap, at the end of its digestive process, is the same as sugar. Glucose even. The sugar you put in your tea, that's called sucrose. When it's taken, it also gets digested to create glucose. So now, morning you had tea, right? You put 2 spoons or 3 spoons of sugar. It's a lot. Because your body doesn't need it. But it tastes nice, right? Sweet. It's addictive. We'll talk about sugar one of these days. So this is breakfast. Or you're eating maize meal porridge with butter and sugar to sweeten. There's no nutritional value in what you've eaten except the butter, which has fats, and fats are healthy for you as long as it's in moderation. So you've just taken a huge volume of sugar into your gut. Most people who eat a breakfast like that, by 10 o'clock, isilungulela. You are looking for Eno from your colleagues at work. Do you have Eno? Do you have... So please, take this very seriously, because the long-term health effects of acid reflux, like I've explained, some of them are really sad. Sometimes if you go to hospitals and you find those people with a trach tube in order to eat, because basically what's happened is their esophagus can get eaten by cancer, or cancer is there, and in order to stop it spreading, they have to remove that esophagus. So now there's a feeding tube. Stomach cancer is also caused by the same. And here's why I said this is a genetic problem for us, because there is sometimes with these diseases a genetic predisposition. How does this come about? Well, if your ancestors suffered from the same, it means that there may be some epigenetic changes in DNA that mean you are going to inherit that. That's why when we take a medical history of someone, we ask these basic questions. Did your father have heart disease? Did your mother have heart disease? Anyone in your family ever been diagnosed with esophageal cancer? Anyone? Because now we're trying to trace history in the lineage. Because once we've traced that, then we know whatever symptoms we're facing could be one of those things. And in a good world, or in a fair world, we would then work with you, because you're an at-risk person, to ensure that nothing in your environment, nothing in your diet will switch on those genes and cause disease to manifest. Does that make sense? So, like I said, it's short and sweet. I really just wanted to touch on acid reflux for today. And I'll see you guys next time. The gut is a long one, so I don't know how many parts we're going to have. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something from this, something you can take away. I know I promised to put food lists. I'm going to put some of these graphics up as well. I'm going to do it immediately after I say goodbye so that I don't forget. But here's to good health. Here's to good health and long life for Tina Bawantu. Thokozeni.